Hi class, today we're going to be reading In La Rinconada, Peru, Searching for Beauty in Ugliness by Marie Arana. You want to open your textbooks to page 419, and this is kind of a longer reading, so sit tight. We're going to first learn about the author. Originally from Lima, Peru, Marie Arana, born in 1949, is a journalist and author and the former chief editor of Book World for the Washington Post. Arana's memoir of growing up as an immigrant in the United States was a finalist for the National Book Award. Her novel Cellophane was a finalist for the John Sargent Prize. Arana has been the chairperson for committees that decide both the Pulitzer Prize and the American Book Award. Her most recent project is a biography of the great liberator of South America, Simón Bolívar. So words that we're going to find in this text are marauding, intemperate, and despoiled. And the reason why I love this story is because it is an article. It's a nonfiction piece, and it's about a real story that actually exists that I never knew about before reading this article. This this town is called La Rinconada, Peru, and it is the highest city elevation-wise of any other city in the entire world. So this city is at the highest elevation. So it's so high of elevation that it's always frozen there and it's always very cold. And it's hard to bring building materials up there. So everything is built out of these kind of tin shelters. And it's a pretty big city, thinking of how remote it is and how high of elevation it is. And the reason why this city exists is because it is a mining city. So all the people who live here subsist off of mining for gold in one way or another. Fortune hunters have been searching for treasures in South America for centuries, and for good reason. Below the surface lie precious stones as well as silver and gold. The mining for gold high in the Peruvian mountains, so the mountains of Peru, have come at a high price for the environment and the people of these lands. In the barren region of La Rinconada, the mining companies use toxic chemicals as they search for gold. Gold. The Aztecs killed for it. The Inca enslaved whole populations for it. Spain sent legions of marauding conquistadors up and down the Americas in a hallucinatory hunt, believing that gold was so abundant that chieftains rolled in it, washing away the glittering residue in their daily morning swims. Down the centuries, the quest for El Dorado has held the South American continent in thrall, luring generations of fortune hunters to its far reaches, from 21st century warlords to 21st century from first century warlords to 21st century adventurers. The earth beneath them has not disappointed. The geographic exuberance known as the caldera of the Andes has yielded a fount of treasure. The emeralds of Boyaca, the silver of Potosi, the gold of Cajamarca. So let me stop here stop here for a second. So El Dorado is a fictional town made of gold. So people have searched for this town, or maybe I should say legendary town. No one knows if it exists. in the South American continent. So people have gone to South America to look for gold and other fortunes, such as silver, emeralds, gemstones, but the material that we're going to be focusing on today is gold. Indeed, when Pizarro conquered Cajamarca in 1532, he demanded a room full of gold from the emperor Atahualpa. When it was produced, he chopped off the Inca's head and established a new kind of golden rule. So it was that a mineral became king and a craze began. Nowhere has Peru's frenzy for gold been so fevered as in the mountains that surround Lake Titicaca. And nowhere has that fever been so intemperate as in a town tucked into a glacial eyrie, La Rinconada, the highest human habitation in the world. So intemperate, we have to guess what that means. I'm guessing it might mean like hot and cold, or good and bad. So that's what I'm guessing. I'm guessing it's like up and down. So people have looked in Peru for gold in many different places, but mostly in the mountains that surround Lake Titicaca, which is actually the highest elevation lake, pure water lake in all of the world also. It's a huge lake, and it is above Lake Titicaca where you will find La Rinconada. It is a destination for only the most valiant. Clinging to the peak of the Mount Anea with a cowl of glacier overhead, La Rinconada boasts few tourists, no hotel, no sights to speak of apart from the endless snow, a dome of blue sky, and a swarm of hard-bitten inhabitants. For the 50,000 souls who brave the sub-zero cold to pick rock on those hoary heights, there is no sewage system, no water, no paved roads, no sanitation whatsoever. It is a wilderness of ice, rock, and gold, perched more than 18,000 feet up in the Peruvian Andes. Let's underline this phrase. So as I told you at the beginning, this city is built completely as a gold mining city. Gold mining city. Besides the gaping mine shafts that scar the mountain's face, are huts of tin built at capricious and precarious angles, with nothing to keep out the glacial wind but improvised sheets of metal, nothing to generate warmth but fetid heaps of garbage. The only convenience here is the electricity, brought in by overlords so that the machinery can grind and shuttle cars can rumble through the mountain's black veins. At night, La Rinconada glitters like a cruel oasis. Make no mistake, this is a trip for the armchair only. As Dante might say, let me guide you through a fascinating circle of hell. So she's saying this is not a good place to visit. This is not a pretty place by any means, and it's not a nice place to visit. To a barren world. I would not have gone up to the peak the locals called La Bella Dormente, Sleeping Beauty, had I not been accompanied by a team of professionals from CARE. I traveled there to write a script for Girl Rising, a film directed by Richard Robbins, produced by the documentary group, and poised for release next week. I actually found this video that she created, and we're going to watch it in class. It is a film about girls who live in desperately hard places, about how educating them could change their families, their communities, and very possibly the world. In the course of my journey up to La Rinconada, I had every expectation that I would find hunger and hardship. What I had not expected was to find beauty in ugliness, to see, as a mountain shaman might put it, the sacred in the profane. Being a native of Lima, I knew what every school child knows, that although Peru is small, slightly smaller than Alaska, it encompasses a virtual panoply of landforms: mountain, jungle, desert, marshland, archipelago, coastline, all in defined geographic areas and often in dramatic contiguity. Fly over Peru, and Mount Hosakaryan's majestic peak seems to hover over the foliage of the Amazon jungle. The green cliffs of Miraflores are just down the coast from the sands of Chonchon. But riding a truck from Punto to the little village of Puntina, circling the northernmost bend of Lake Titicaca, I almost convinced myself that this trip would continue its happy paved course into the horizon. The roads were good, the views of the so-called highest navigable lake in the world literally breathtaking, and at almost 13,000 feet, there was no malaise that a few cups of cocoa tea couldn't cure. In fact, this part of the world is known for its pharmacological cornucopia. Every shrub or weed is a botanical miracle. Flores de Bach for melancholy, Muña for chills or bone pain, Pampanes for intestinal gas, Yahur, Conca for diarrhea. Fields of medicinal possibility rushed past as we raced along the highway. Looking out at the reed catamarans that skimmed the lake's dazzling surface, or the grass islands that floated peacefully in the sun, I could imagine that snows trickling into that paradise were anything but pristine. Okay, now this is important to note. So Lake Titicaca, and yes, that's the name of the lake, probably the funniest name of any lake. Lake Titicaca is beautiful and surrounded by plants that have medicinal uses. So that means that people use these plants for medicine. And this is important because we're going to later know that this lake is being polluted by the mining that's going on. In La Rinconada. Within a half hour of leaving Putina, however, the road had become dirt, rock, soon frozen mud, and my crew was being pitched about, as it would be for 2 more hours of a difficult journey. The Altiplano, a stretch of high mesa, only slightly lower than the Tibetan plateau, stretched before us, stippled with rough grass and stone. Trees were scarce, thatched huts more so, and the odd flowers, bright orange cantutas, had brought a herd of startled alpaca onto that frigid January plain. They stood at the limits of fated pasture, raising their delicate heads as we bounced over rut and rock, eyeing us with a haughty scorn. Before long, as bright swaths of arid plain gave way to sacred earth, we could see why La Rinconada is only rarely visited by government poobahs. The air at 18,000 feet is stiflingly thin, the cold excruciating. Now and then ramshackle trucks and vans rattle past carrying miners and their families, stopping on the roadside to catch their breath, chew coca leaf, and leave offerings to the earth goddess, Pachamama, to whom altars had been erected along the way. All about, for as far as the eye could see, was a crazed landscape. What was once a region of sparkling lakes, leaping fish, and grassland is now a barren world that beggars the imagination. So let's, the air is stifling, the cold excruciating, and then what was once a beautiful area, now not so beautiful. The green is gone, the earth is turned. What you see as Mount Anina looms into view is a lunar landscape pitted with orange lakes that reek cyanide. The birds that once flew over La Rinconada are nowhere to be seen. None flap overhead, save an occasional vulture. The odor is staggering. It is the putrid stench of chemicals, of rot, of human excrement. Even a whipping wind cannot sweep away the stink. So, La Rinconada is stinky, cold, and has no more birds, plants, sorry, I should put or plants, and the lakes are poison. With cyanide. As you ascend toward the green-white cap of Sleeping Beauty, all you see is garbage, a choking ruin, and ghostly shadows picking through it. Gigantic trucks shove at the earth. Whole families wade out into the toxic pools, fishing for gold. Along the perilously winding road that climbs to the summit, flocks of women in wide skirts scramble up cliffs, carrying heavy bags of ore, hoping to pound a fleck of gold from the waste that is spilled from the mine shafts. Children stagger beside them, shouldering burdens of their own. So all you see is garbage, a choking ruin, and ghostly shadows picking through it. And then you get the rocks that came out of the mine shaft and pick through it, looking for flecks of gold. With so much poverty about, it's hard to believe that Sleeping Beauty harbors riches, that gold ripped from her entrails will glitter on Cartier or Tiffany counters around the world. But history books tell us that Mount Anina has been offering up gold since the days of the Inca. According to travelers' journals, a block the size of a horse's head and weighing more than 100 pounds was pulled free in the 1500s and sent to the Spanish king. The region's rivers were said to be strewn with glittering nuggets. El Inca Garcilaso de la Vega, a half-Indian, half-Spanish chronicler who lived in the 16th century, wrote that this tract of Peru contained gold beyond imagining, chunks of shiny rock as large as a human head, and 24-karat pure, had rolled from the damp black stone. Although the king's mines collapsed in the 1700s under the weight of the glacier and were abandoned for 200 years, interest in Anania was rekindled in the 1960s when teams of European and Japanese mountaineers scaled a stretch known as the Caldera Real. Hordes of village boys followed, building huts, bringing families. With little more than small picks and big dreams, some defied the odds and struck gold. Today, there are just enough stories of random fortune to keep their children here. So with little more than small picks and big dreams, some defied the odds and struck gold. So that's why people live here, because they want to strike gold, a bench of gold. Peru is booming these days. Its restaurants are full. Its cuisine has become all the rage. Cusco and Machu Picchu are world-class destinations. Peru's economy boasts one of the highest growth rates in the world. In the past 6 years, its annual growth has hovered between 6 and 9%, rivaling the colossal engines of China and India. Peru is one of the world's leading producers of silver and one of Latin America's most exuberant founts of precious metals. It is an energetic producer of natural gas. It is one of the top 5 harvesters of fish on the planet. Its premier fashion photographer is the darling of Vogue. Walk Lima's streets and you can't fail to see the evidence of progress. Here is a country alive with investment in tourism, a hive of construction, home to a rising and robust middle class. But it is gold that has brought multinational companies to the highlands of Puno, many of them installing sturdy, viable operations that promise to lift rural communities out of poverty. Peru is hoping that Atahualpa's curse is dead, that gold will be its salvation, that the country will no longer be, as the old saying has it, a beggar sitting on a bench of gold. Okay, this is important. So what this is meaning is a poor country with many untapped resources. So if you're a beggar, then you're wanting money from people. But if you're sitting on a bench of gold, why would you need money from other people? So that's what Peru was. It's a poor country with many untapped resources. So down in the earth, there's gold, there's silver, there's gems, but they need to be able to have the means to get those resources in order to get the money from them. All the same, the wheels of progress that have sped Peru toward economic success and a burgeoning middle class have yet to climb the pestilential road to La Rinconada. There, in the shadow of Sleeping Beauty, every miner is on his own, and every woman and child who accompanies him a hostage to fickle fortune. Gold no longer rolls from the mountain in chunks the size of a man's head, if indeed it ever did. But the present generation of miners has found that a manic pounding of rock can produce miracles. In 2011, 150 tons of gold were harvested in Peru, worth $6.3 billion. In order to produce it, almost 5 million tons of Peruvian rock were knocked free and ground down. Look at it this way. For every gold ring you see on a finger, miners have had to turn 250 tons of rock. So what they're saying is to produce one gold ring, to produce just one gold ring, ding, 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 that equals like a whale's worth of rock. I don't really know how to draw a whale. Okay, so 250 tons of rock for just one gold ring. So imagine moving that much rock. You're basically moving entire mountains. You're changing entire landscapes. And that's going to take a toll on the environment. because you move mountains and you move trees, you move habitat for animals, you change the way rivers go. So moving that much rock for one ring has its consequences. In La Rinconada, the ore that harbors those precious flecks is washed in pounds of cyanide, pounded with mercury in giant mortars of stone, and burned clean in ovens that send mercury fumes coiling up into the glacier's snows. So, cyanide and mercury used to get gold out of rocks. So that cyanide and mercury is washed into the water system. The mercury is burned and sent into the atmosphere. So you have cyanide in the water and you have mercury in the air. The work outdoors is often done by women and children. The work in the damp, freezing shafts is done by men. At the end of the process, a miner working under the cachero system, a man who labors for 30 days and gets paid on the 31st day in the form of whatever rock he can carry, may walk away with a nugget worth $40. His neighbor, on the other hand, may be rich beyond his imagining. One thing is sure, every year less and less is harvested from Sleeping Beauty. There's only so much gold on this planet. For all the masks of Tutankhamun, for all the headdresses of the Lord of Saipan, for all the bling and glitter of Fifth Avenue, the total amount of gold that humans have been able to pull from rock is a mere 170,000 metric tons, barely enough to fill 2 Olympic swimming pools. More than half of it has been mined in the last 50 years. Some of this, mind you, has been done responsibly, but as earth is heaved and ore carved from the unruly cliffs of Ania, the glacier and nearby lakes have sent toxic injections to the sparkling waters of Lake Titicaca. So the pollution from the mining in La Rinconada goes into Lake Titicaca, and it affects all the people who live on that lake and who live off that lake. So imagine if this lake is so high up, how many different places rely on that water that runs from that lake and down the mountain to get to the sea. Millions of people depend on the water from Lake Titicaca, and that water is being polluted by this one town that's high up in the Peruvian mountains that's searching for gold. Something that's not even necessary for us to live. It's just something we put on our fingers and is sparkly. A sudden awe. Wandering the ice-mud streets of La Rinconada, one can't help but hope that this gold town's days are numbered. The population that lives below, that has inhabited the shores of Lake Titicaca for centuries, made that hope known last year in a protest against all mining operations that didn't take into consideration the health and welfare of the locals. The Amara, who are gentle by nature, were particularly vociferous on the subject, storming through Puno last May and unleashing their fury on everything in their way. The Peruvian military responded in kind. The trickle-down of an economic boom can be surprising. Even so, with all the antipathy a traveler might summon for a place so willfully despoiled, I found myself standing beside the road a good distance from La Rinconada, looking back at the promontory in wonder. With all my senses jangled, with the altitude making my every step as labored as an astronaut's, I found myself filled with sudden awe. Like the ancient mariner who stared at the leaden sea and its hideous slime, and eventually beheld a rare, soul-lifting beauty, I suddenly saw the tin rooftops gleam like a mantle of diamonds. As the sun moved over the snow, the ravished mountains seemed to ripple with ribbons of color. In that happy trance I recalled the kindness of a widow who offered me the shelter of her hut and a gourd of hot soup. I remembered the fiery spirit of Zena, a 14-year-old girl who could recite a string of verses by the great poet Vallejo. I heard the laughter of a child in yellow who danced in a noonday cantina. Even here, on this plundered peak, there are fleeting moments of joy. Okay, we'll talk about the story more in class, and I believe we'll do the comprehension check questions in class. So please just make sure you watch this video. I hope you did. Thank you for watching. I will see you in class. Bye.